What's going on, everybody? Thanks to anybody that will be joining me live and to anybody joining me on archive. Um, right now, one of the biggest topics, I guess you can say, is healthcare and what's going on with this country's healthcare system and where it's going to go. And whatever happens or doesn't happen, either or, within the next year or two, it's going to have a dramatic impact on where we're going to go in the future. Because whether it delays something, whether it delays the inevitable, whether it would go either which way. Right now, one of the biggest challenges that any president, and right now we know who the president is healthcare. Right? It's one of the biggest challenges on the table. And the thing about healthcare is two things, and this is the reality that everybody just needs to understand. Number one, it's far too expensive. It's far too expensive in this country because it's run by private businesses that are for profit. So you have to keep that in mind, right? Um, we pay far more for the same medicine that any other country does. We pay far more for just regular procedures. I mean, we just overpay for a lot of stuff. And one of the reasons we overpay is because for-profit private industry runs it, right? Now, there's people that look at it two ways. Either A, well, it would be less expensive if the government just got out of the way, right, and wasn't involved in it, right? The idea is, well, the free market will dictate what the prices are, and the free market will bring prices down. You know, the other idea is, well, no, we have to force, these prices to be brought down. And one idea is the most effective, in my opinion, is universal healthcare, right? And I think the data shows that. And I think one of the arguments against any of these ideas, obviously, is, well, it's not perfect. There's problems. We're going to have problems with this. We're going to have problems with that. It's going to be worse for me. I think everyone looks at it from their perspective. They don't look at it. They don't look at the overall picture, right? And maybe that just depends on your line of thinking. I don't know. Most people think about themselves and their situation and whether or not they're going to personally be better off under one system or another. That's just the way it is. If you can afford healthcare and you can get it lower in the free market, and you're not taxed because of it, for other people can get it, well, most people will be for that, right? If you can't afford healthcare, and then obviously you're going to be for a system that is going to help you get that healthcare, right? I mean, it's just everybody looks at it from their own perspective. Now, let me first tell you my personal situation. So me, I have very good healthcare, right, coverage under my employer, right? I have very good healthcare coverage, and I pay very little for it, to be honest. And it's just part of the benefits I get from my job. I don't pay a lot for it, and it's worth a lot, but it doesn't come out of my pocket. And I've had that for almost 10 years now. It hasn't really, I have not been impacted personally whatsoever under Obamacare or any other care, right? Before Obamacare, during the transition process, when it went into law, it did not affect me personally, right? However, I know people it did impact, and I know people it impacted negatively, and I know people it impacted, right? I know anecdotally, I know the two sides of the spectrum, right? But I will say this: the people it positively impacted, it saved their life. The people it negatively impacted had to pay a little more for healthcare. or their taxes went slightly up, or um, they had over 100 employees, so that's cut back on the number of employees they had, right? So I'm not saying I don't empathize with the situation they may be in, right? Or they didn't want health care, and this is the most common one. I don't want health care. I feel like I'm healthy. I don't feel I should be forced to, and I hate the fact that I'm being penalized at the end of the year in my income tax, right? But if I weigh both options, right? If I weigh it's saving people's lives over here, and while I empathize and I understand these are big inconveniences these other people are experiencing, what outweighs the other? Like, if we have an honest conversation about that, what outweighs the other thing? Now, I'm not saying it's perfect, right? I think if we were to go to what I believe they should do, right, which is universal health care, we wouldn't have these problems, right? We just wouldn't. But the reality is, a lot of is the industry anyway, right? The private healthcare industry is extremely powerful. Okay, it's a very powerful industry, and they got the puppets in Washington controlled, right? And it's ironic because you keep hearing, well, we don't want government-run healthcare, and personally, I understand where they're coming from, but right now, just because it's private companies running it does not mean that it's not being run by an entity. It is. They control the government. They got right the puppets in Washington to sign bills like we're not able to cap how much the big pharma can charge for prescription drugs. That is insane. That's crazy. That is crazy. I mean, it's no secret, as to why we overpay for shit, right? I mean, myself, I just found this out a couple of months ago. My grandmother couldn't afford most of the drugs that her doctor prescribed her, right? And she was on Medicare, right? She couldn't afford it. Now, I took care of that situation, okay, but that is a very, very frustrating thing, and the reason is because these drugs are so goddamn expensive. They patent them and they jack up the fucking price. They should not be allowed to do that. Okay. They should not be allowed to do that. They don't allow utility companies to do that. Why the fuck would they allow people to do that with medicine that people need to survive? That's fucking crazy. Right? That's insane. Now, personally, I have a lot of issues myself with Obamacare, right? Obamacare ended up being a basically a deal that Obama tried to meet the Republicans halfway is what he tried to do, right? And for trying to do that, which they were going to be against it anyway, they named it Obamacare, so it could have a negative name for people that hated Obama. Because that's what the name came from, right? A lot of states would rebrand and rename. They wouldn't call it that, obviously. They would call it something else, but it was still an extension of Obamacare. And it's strange because they'll pull people in different states, especially in red states, and it's still Obamacare. They just call it something else, right? It's a lot of these Medicaid expansions and people. I mean, it was such a popular system, right? Yet, it's when they asked them about Obamacare, they fucking hated it. They didn't even realize they were under Obamacare. I mean, this is insane, right? This is crazy. Right now, right? the red states are the ones that are going to suffer the most, right? If Obamacare is repealed, they're going to be the ones to suffer the most. When you look at the stats and everything, Trump, a lot of Trump supporters, like middle class and under, they're going to suffer the most. When you look at the numbers, I mean, you would almost think like the way it's negatively impacting them. I mean, you would think it would have been the other way around. Like you would think they lost the election, right? But that's actually not what's happening. It turns out that the people that were trying to pass this healthcare law, the Affordable Care Act, agree with it or disagree with it, is that they had good intentions, right? It's not perfect. There's a lot of fixing it needs, right? Obviously, it has a lot of problems, right? One of them, for example, is why does the pharmaceutical companies have so much? Why do they have so much power? Why can't Canada, for example, sell us drugs that work for Canadians? It's just stupid, right? I mean, so that's my thing. My thing is we have an honest conversation about this. One, healthcare is extremely expensive, and I'll respect anyone's opinion as long as it's consistent, right? So what I'm saying, like this is all I'll say. You cannot be against Obamacare because it's quote unquote government run, but before a government imposed law under Donald Trump and the Republicans, you know, when it's a law passed through the government still. You can't be against Obamacare when Obama says he wants to take care of everybody, but before it, when Trump says he's going to take care of everybody. You can't have it both ways. It can be, yeah, I'm for it now, but I was against it then, but I'm for it now because Trump said, right? You can't do that. I mean, I'm reading stories right now of people praising Donald Trump for this lady's like son lost his job and because of Obamacare, okay, he was able to have affordable health care while he was unemployed. Right now, this lady was thanking Trump for that because she thought that was something Trump imposed and Trump passed. When the reality is, if it was under the Republican plan, her son would not have been covered. He would not have been covered. Not with what they're proposing. Now, if you're the type that says, I just don't want the government involved in healthcare, right? Fair enough. But you have to accept the reality that there's millions of people that are going to die for lack of healthcare. That's just a reality. That's just it. If you're one of the people that are angry because you're being forced to pay a penalty on an income tax because right now you're healthy, and then they get rid of Obamacare, and pre-existing conditions are no longer covered, and then you get sick, then you can't get upset that you're not able to get it under an insurance plan. Like you can't have it, both ways. You just can't. So it's people get it's if you bring up the reality that if we go to a plan that, let's say you just say you take the complete libertarian stance and say the Rand Paul stance. I just don't want the government involved in this whatsoever, right? I want the government completely out of healthcare. Then you should be saying the same thing right now about Trump care or Ryan care, whatever the fuck you want to call it. You should be saying the same thing. It's what do you think Trump meant when he said we're going to take care of everybody? First of all, does that really mean, is that literal? Right? Like who's everybody in his mind then? Who's that? I don't know. So like it's like this, like I get it, right? There's people that don't want to be forced to buy the health care. That's one of the negative aspects of Obamacare. It's a very negative aspect. I understand. Hey, I'm 21. I'm healthy. I don't want to pay for this shit. Right? I get it. Right? Now, if you and I get it. Even though I bring up, hey, what if like you break your leg or something happens and you got to call the ambulance and you're gonna be fucking in debt. No, well, that's my problem. Let me deal with that. Right? I get it. Fine. Okay. Fair enough. But the reality is, let's not act. Most people wouldn't pay that. Okay, it's just you're gonna have more people going bankrupt because of this, and it's if you want to go back to that, where people just go bankrupt because they can't afford to pay the hospital bills. Okay, if you want to go back to that, then it is what it is. But healthcare is a real issue because all of us don't live forever, right? All of us get sick, unforeseen circumstances happen, right? And it's for what it's worth, right? But a lot of these issues they don't seem to be issues in other countries, and I keep hearing, well, once in England, do you know what happened? Like, okay, fine. Like, it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect, no matter what system you go. It's not. So my thing is, no, don't mandate it. For what? Why are we going to mandate it? I mean, if I'm brutally honest, I just say the top 1-2%. We're not going to cut their taxes. Okay, it's that simple. Right? I don't understand why that's a hard concept to understand. Now, if you're all for it, no, lower the taxes, like lower them dramatically. You can't have it all. You can't. You can have the biggest, baddest military. You can't rebuild the infrastructure. I mean, you can't do a lot of these things if you don't tax people. Like, who's going to do them? Like, who's going to miraculously, do all this shit? I'm just asking for priorities here, right? That's all. The reality is, right? We could go one of two ways, right? Number one, so these are one of two ways we can go about it. Either we go the universal healthcare way, that's number one, or if you want to leave it to the private market, I'm all for that. Fine. But we have to pay livable wages. Meaning, if somebody works a full-time job, they need to be able to afford all necessities. A home, a vehicle to drive in. You got to get to work somehow, right? Right? And food, obviously, they need to eat. And healthcare, right? But healthcare is in like what? Look, man. So if 20-year-olds get cancer too, like it's not like they get diseases too. They get extremely sick as well. Like it's we should just have everybody covered, right? At least make it to where they could afford it. That's all. What's the big fucking deal? Like this is what I don't get. What's the point in a society? What's the point of having someone work a full-time job and they can't even afford shit? What's the point? You have people that work a full-time job, they need to get a second job just to afford moving on to the next month. That's insane. I'm not saying like, hey, if you work a full-time job, they need to drive a Mercedes. I'm not saying they should be able to afford a PlayStation 4 or some shit. Okay, I'm not saying that they should get new rims in their car. I'm not asking for shit like that. I'm not asking for a Lamborghini for everybody, right? All I'm saying is they should afford necessities. And in my opinion, healthcare is a necessity because all of us deal with it, right? So you're telling me all these big, giant industries, these giant companies, these giant corporations, right, that make food that I honestly believe, and they have been linked to cancer, and people get this cancer. You're telling me that they don't want to pay a little more in taxes so these people can get health care? Now, obviously, this is not all corporations, but just put it in perspective here, right? It's embarrassing that we can't guarantee coverage for everybody. It's embarrassing that we need to like have people pay penalties if they don't get it. They should just have it, right? It should just be a thing, right? And the argument always is, and this is the counter argument, well, it's not really free because somebody's paying for it. Yeah, it's going to be paid through taxes. We have to look at the budget and decide what's important. So, for example, why are we increasing 54 billion on military spending for? For what? For what? Why are we spending almost $700 billion on the military? We spend more than the next 12 nations combined now. If that passes anyway, it's going to be more than the next 12 nations combined. Why do we need to spend more than the next 12 nations combined? Why do we have to spend 38 billion for Israel? Well, why do we have to spend trillions on fucking pointless wars like Afghanistan and Iraq? For what? Well, why do we do that? For what? So that's all I'm saying, right? When people say, well, there's no money for it. Like, yeah, there is. We're just not prioritizing the money properly. That's all. But it's one or the other. Either you pay people, either people have to make enough money. Either this country guarantees that if you work full time, you're going to be able to afford all that, right? Or we go the universal health care way. Those are the only two ways it's going to work. Any other way, either people die in the millions, okay, or we continue going the route we're going now, which is just a bunch of drama and these hybrid versions like Obamacare of healthcare for all, which is actually not really healthcare for all. It's just kind of like a hybrid version of the free market mixed in with universal healthcare, and you can't have both. Like, it's just not going to work. So, there's a lot of issues, obviously. Okay. And that's all I'm saying. Right. It's my opinion. That is that. And for people that think, well, you can't do it, look, man, right? If we have an honest conversation, if then at least be honest. At least say, yeah, I'm fine with people dying. If then at least just say it. Like, you're okay with some old dude that he worked for 60, 70 years of his life, and he's old, he's fragile now. He doesn't have a way to work anymore. He can't make money anymore. You're okay with him just dying. Like, just say it then. Like, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of cruel, but at least it's honest, right? At least you're being honest at that point. So it's whatever it is, okay? I'm just saying. So with that said, this is the style. It is late, and I'm going to bed, right? Out. I'm out.